Hello everyone, this is AndresRestart, and I believe that The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom is helping to pave the path for the eventual, long theorized, and also rumored The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time remake. I believe eventually we will see a modern, ambitious remake of Ocarina of Time, and I think this is likely coming out within the first couple years of Nintendo Switch 2. In the meanwhile, however, us Zelda fans have Echoes of Wisdom to enjoy, but I think there are things about this game that strengthen the argument for this eventual remake, and so that's what I'd like to get further into today. But before going forward, let me ask that if you do enjoy my content, to please subscribe and hit that notification bell. For today's sponsored message, I would like to share my experience with the G8 Plus Galileo wireless mobile game controller from GameSir. They sent it over to me, I've given it a try on a few different devices, and I think that's one of the unique things about this device. You can use it on your phones, you can play games there, or on your Nintendo Switch, and regardless of what device you're using, it fits them all. You just slide it on and it fits snugly, there's no concerns about it falling off or anything like that. It's a comfortable and safe hold. And it's pretty easy to sync up through Bluetooth, and while playing on the Nintendo Switch, because I have seen other devices in the past through Bluetooth connection have some delay, I noticed no delay. I was able to play Smash Brothers and it worked just fine. Now in terms of how that controller actually feels, it feels like your typical pro controller. It's got quality Hall effect control sticks, great shoulder buttons. I'm growing especially fond of the D-pad, and I would enjoy using this for pretty much any kind of game. So if you're looking for a comfortable pro-style controller that can work with different devices, I definitely recommend this wireless controller. If you're interested, there will be a link in the description below. So if you've been following me for a little while already, you likely have already seen a few of my different videos where I make the argument that there will eventually be a modern, ambitious remake for The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. And there are different videos on that. I have a relatively recent one where I go over different interviews with the series producer, Aonuma, and essentially what's pointed out in that video is that there's this long history of all these interviews where Aonuma teases future Zelda games, sometimes even him confirming himself that he literally did tease a future Zelda game, and also showing some trends we've seen during those interviews that help to tell us what is actually a tease. And based off that, there are two interviews, one from Nintendo Dream Magazine, another from Game Informer, where Aonuma essentially teases Ocarina of Time in the future. So if you want more information on that, you can check that. It'll be linked in the description below and the iCard and all that good stuff. But I want to point out that because of that, I think an Ocarina of Time remake is extremely likely. And I think it's very likely coming to Nintendo Switch 2. Why? Because Tears of the Kingdom came out in 2023, that was a big 3D Zelda game, it took them over half a decade to get that game out. It's likely going to be a very long time before the next proper open-air 3D Zelda game. But Nintendo is still going to want to have something major Zelda that gets a lot of us on board with Nintendo Switch 2. So I think they're going to need something, and it can't be a new game, which is why I think Ocarina of Time Remake makes the most sense. And looking at the history of Zelda releases, I do think it supports this idea even more so. But I also think there are more signs, such as a build-up towards that game. We've seen Nintendo do this before with different games. I oftentimes like to bring up the example of the Pikmin series, where we saw Pikmin in the Nintendo Universal Park, where we saw the Pikmin mobile game, where we saw Pikmin 3 Deluxe, and this all amounted to Pikmin 4. Or perhaps let's use another example on a grander scale. Look at how Nintendo built up to the Mario movie. They had the Mario Lego sets, they had the various Mario games, the anniversaries and all. And actually, even that Mario movie culminated into increased sales for various Mario games, including Mario Wonder, which launched the holiday after the movie. So with this in mind, looking at The Legend of Zelda, yes, we're coming off Tears of the Kingdom last year, and now we are enjoying The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom. For the most part, Nintendo has maintained almost an annual Zelda release. They did skip 2022, but initially Tears of the Kingdom was supposed to come out during that year, but was delayed to May 2023. Excluding that 1 year, Zelda releases have been annual, and so the Zelda momentum has continued. But we also know about the live-action Zelda movie that's in the works. Wes Ball is no longer working on the Planet of the Apes series, he's moving forward with the Legend of Zelda movie, that's his next project, and at some point we're going to get an update on this movie. And also, we've already gotten confirmation of the Zelda Lego set. This Zelda Lego set is based off the Deku Tree, but interestingly, it's not just the Deku Tree from Breath of the Wild, but also the Deku Tree from Ocarina of Time. And it even also includes the Hero Time version of Link. So you might be seeing some similarities here compared to how Nintendo built up to the Mario movie. And something else that I think is really interesting is that while I don't think Ocarina of Time Remake would come out next year for 2025, because I think there's so many other things that would be lining up, like the next mainline 3D Mario, perhaps Mario Kart, something from Monolith Soft, Metroid Prime 4, Pokemon Legends EA. I think Nintendo has so much lined up for next year, it doesn't really make sense to have something like this in 2025. But in 2026, where we have a better chance of seeing more news on the movie, it would also be the 40th anniversary. So putting out something like Ocarina of Time in a modern way might be perfect timing then and still relatively early on to the Switch 2 lifecycle. This could be ideal. Which brings me to The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom. That's this year's Zelda game. They are keeping that Zelda momentum going. It is coming out in September, the same month as the Zelda Lego release. And there are some things in Echoes of Wisdom that I think are very interesting. So for example, we see the Deku Tree, and its design more closely matches the design from Ocarina of Time, and also the Lego set. Moving past the Deku Tree though, when we had the first trailer, something else that really stuck out to me was Princess Zelda, her design, almost looking like a chibi-ish version of the design from Ocarina of Time, but also her being in that pink crystal, very much the way she was trapped in Ocarina of Time. The references seem very strong this time around. But it's not even just that. They're also bringing back the Deku Scrubs, a Zelda species that was prevalent during the games of Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask. Now you might look at these different elements and just say, sure, it's a Zelda game. They're going to have different references to prior Zelda games. That's par for the course. And I do agree with that. I think in general, Zelda games are going to be referencing prior Zelda games. But looking over all the footage we have right now, I don't see any blatant references to Twilight Princess or The Wind Waker. And maybe once we have the game, we'll find references to those games. And at that point, it'll become more clear that there isn't like this bias towards just Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask. And some of you might be saying, well, there are other references that we can see. For example, there are the goddess statues, which we saw in Skyward Sword. We've already seen that in Echoes of Wisdom. And of course, a lot of people have been referring to Echoes of Wisdom as 2D Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom. But I can explain this away a little bit. The similarities we're seeing between Echoes of Wisdom and Breath of the Wild and Tears have more to do with the overall design philosophy with Zelda now. A lot of the similarities, I think, have a lot more to do with just what Zelda is now. The designs of the Gerudo, the designs of the Gorons, they match up because I think that's just how we think of Gerudos and Gorons now. And then there's all the mechanics like Bind and such, which remind us of Ultra Hand, but these are gameplay concepts. I think Zelda now is about providing these unique abilities that have a wide variety of application. Being able to explore the world and come up with a variety of different solutions, that way different players could have different experiences. This is a new fundamental of Zelda. So that's why we're seeing those connections. And when it comes to goddess statues, I also think that's more of a current staple of the Zelda series, because not only were they introduced in Skyward Sword, the first Fujibayashi directed Zelda game, but then in Breath and Tears, the next Fujibayashi directed Zelda games, the goddess statues are just part of that world. So it's not really a new element or a callback to prior Zelda games because it's been a constant as of late. These references to Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask are a callback to the Hero of Time from a very different era of Zelda that is not so connected. So I think it is more worthy of note. Especially that Deku Tree design. They could have chosen something like the Breath of the Wild look, but they didn't. And it is also curious it's coming out at the same time as a Zelda Lego set that has both designs. So why is this relevant? Because it's reminding people a little bit of Ocarina of Time. It's acquainting people to some of these characters and ideas. But going beyond these references, I think also the fact that a new 2D Zelda game is coming out now, that's another type of Zelda game that Nintendo has now exhausted that will not be made available during the early parts of Switch 2. Because beforehand, someone might have argued that, well, maybe we'll just see a new 2D Zelda game to start off the Switch 2 era. That's clearly not going to be the case with this new 2D Zelda entry. And I also do think Nintendo needs to think about what kind of Zelda games they're putting when. I don't think you can just have back-to-back-to-back years of remasters, remasters, remasters. You have to mix it up a little bit. You have to have new games, you have to have spin-offs, remasters, remakes, and it shouldn't be the same type of thing every single year. Looking over the history of Zelda releases, Nintendo likes to keep things varied, they like to keep us guessing, and scratching our heads sometimes when we're sort of expecting certain releases, like in the case of Wind Waker and Twilight Princess HD. When are those going to happen? We're not sure. Maybe it would be a next year thing. Or something else completely different, perhaps a Zelda spin-off. Or maybe it'll be a break year before a bigger release to come out sometime in 2026 for the 40th anniversary, which I think might just be a big ambitious remake for Ocarina of Time. And there's something else I'll speak on here that I think is very interesting. I'm not certain on it, but it's definitely getting me thinking, and that's potential gameplay changes to Ocarina of Time. It's hard to say just how ambitious this remake would be. I think from a visual perspective, it's going to look like a modern game. The idea behind it would be to showcase the abilities of the Switch 2, and simply by looking really good, that's really good marketing. That's going to get people interested in buying it for Switch 2. A next generation console that's going to be vastly more powerful than the Switch, and will be outputting visuals that just aren't even close to possible on Switch. But looking at a lot of the gameplay mechanics of Echoes of Wisdom, and considering how it looks like the current form of Zelda are these puzzle mechanics and abilities that have a wide variety of applications, I wonder if maybe they'll take some of these philosophies and mix up Ocarina of Time a little bit. At this point, we're almost talking more of a reimagining, and I think some things could be changed, but I also don't expect something extremely dramatic because part of the idea behind this is for it to be a bit of a stopgap before the next big new Zelda game. And I wouldn't expect the entire Zelda team to be focused on this effort, perhaps overseeing, perhaps some co-development, but there'll be another team involved, if not more. But hypothetically speaking, I do think it would be really interesting if they were to redesign some elements of Ocarina of Time. For example, imagining how the hookshot might work with these modern Zelda mechanics in mind, not just being able to hookshot onto specific targets, but rather a wide variety of surface types that the hookshot could be able to latch onto. There might be some limitations, but for the most part, a whole slew of different surfaces the hookshot could latch onto could create a variety of different gameplay possibilities in terms of where you can go. That would open up exploration significantly. How might that change the game? Well, they might have to make some serious design changes keeping that in mind. So it could end up getting too ambitious here. But let's dial it back a little bit. Maybe it doesn't have to be something that drastic. Maybe something more subtle, like introducing the item wheel. Now, the way the item wheel works in Tears of the Kingdom, some people find it a bit cumbersome because the item list can get very long and sometimes you're searching too long for a particular item, and that can take a bit away from the experience and perhaps even the immersion. And we're seeing something similar with Echoes of Wisdom. But what I find interesting about this scenario for a Switch 2 Zelda game, in this case maybe Ocarina of Time Remake, is that we have this possibility of new control options on Switch 2. And there have been patents, rumors, and even Sakurai talking about it recently, this idea of introducing a scroll wheel shoulder button. Basically imagine like that scroll wheel you have on your mouse, but you rotate it so it's fitting the angle of a typical L or R button. You can still click it like an L or R button, but you can also scroll left and right. And this could work in a lot of different scenarios, including perhaps menu navigation where you can slide through a row of items very quickly and select it. This could improve the flow of gameplay for how modern Zelda games have been working, and we might see it in something like an Ocarina of Time remake. So seeing how Nintendo is treating Echoes of Wisdom, I think it gives us an idea of how Nintendo wants to treat just modern Zelda games in general. And with all the Ocarina of Time references, and how it's coming out alongside the LEGO set, and everything else we've discussed in the past with the Anuma interviews and just them needing some kind of major significant Zelda release early on for the next generation, I think a path is being paved here. I think we are being set up for a really nice 40th anniversary celebration that may not just include news on the movie, but also a pretty exciting game for many longtime Zelda fans. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments below. This is AndresRestart, Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.